The original Nintendo Game Boy is a nostalgic highlight for a lot of people. However, it wasn't without its drawbacks. The screen was blurry, and if you wanted to play in the dark, you usually ended up straining your eyes or your neck to get the perfect angle to see your game. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a modern-day fix for an age-old problem. This is the Backlight Bivert mod for the original Game Boy. Hi guys, welcome back to the Retro Fix. It's time for our teardown. We're going to get this Game Boy taken apart. We'll take all those screws out and get it separated. And then we're going to want to pull that friction cable down to get them completely disconnected. Next, we'll take all the screws out of the front board and remove it from the housing. This will give us clear access to the LCD. Our goal here will be to remove the polarizer and the reflector off the back of the LCD. Our next step will be to take the front two screws out of that front flex cable that comes down from the LCD. This will allow us a little bit of freedom to move the LCD when we need to get behind it. After removing these front two screws, get a plastic spludger and slowly pry the LCD up to get that freedom we need to get behind it. Then take a craft knife and carefully start at a corner, preferably somewhere where you have good access, and try to get underneath all the layers of the polarizer and the reflector. You're going to want to go really slowly, as any slight misstep could crack the LCD or damage the cables. So take your time with this and just try to get underneath all the layers and slowly peel a corner up. Once you get that far, you should be able to get a finger underneath there and start to pry it up slowly. Again, take your time, we're not in a rush. This is probably the most difficult step of this whole modification. Soon you have the whole thing off and in one piece, hopefully. This should come in handy later. I barely had any residue left on mine, so a little alcohol and a cotton swab will take care of that easily. Now we're ready for a modification. This is our backlight, which already has a resistor. We'll clip a small piece out of the plastic frame, as seen here, which will allow the cables to feed down from the backlight to the solder points that we need to connect it to. We'll slide the backlight behind the LCD, and time to fire up our soldering iron. We'll solder the negative to the right side and the positive to the left of the capacitor, in the center of the board. Should look something like this when you're done. Now it's time to test it, see if our backlight's working. Looks good to me. And we'll just go ahead and put the polarizer. What? Yeah, so apparently we didn't do such a good job when we were pulling off the LCD. Looks like we have some dead horizontal and vertical lines. Here's a quick fix for vertical lines. Take your soldering iron and slowly but constantly move the tip back and forth across the ribbon cable as seen here. Don't stop and burn the cable out, just go slowly back and forth. This is heating up the contacts underneath and should, if done carefully and consistently, re-adhere to the LCD and actually create those connections again. Take your time and just keep going nice and slow. This will get rid of the vertical lines. You can see the lines kind of flickering as the solder cools. This just shows you that you need to be patient and wait for all the lines to disappear. As far as the horizontal lines go, that's a different repair and we're going to have to do that for another time. So for now, we're just going to roll on and keep going. You'll notice that the pixels, if looking at where the Nintendo logo will be when we put a game in, are actually backwards. This isn't because the pixels are actually reversed, it's because the polarizer has been rotated 90 degrees. Now, I did this in expectation of the Bivert mod flipping the pixels back. This is all part of the process to get the cleanest, clearest image we can. Now it's time to solder the Bivert chip to the back board. So, I'm going to cut 2 leads here to give us some room to set it flat on that board. One up top, and one right below it. Counting from the right on the ribbon cable connector of the board, you count 6 and 7 pins over. Those are 2 pins that you have to lift up to get the board underneath that will bridge to the connection on the board. Fire up the soldering iron and heat those connections and lift them up with a craft knife. You also notice that I am soldering one of the pins that I accidentally lifted. That's no problem, just set it back down. Line up your chip on the board and tack 1 pin down so you can get it to stay. Next, just fill the holes that line up perfectly with the contacts on the board. There should be 3 up top and then 2 pins that bridge. This is a brand new soldering iron and you can tell it's extremely hot and actually melted some of the plastic up there. I was having trouble with regulating the temperature, but it got the job done. It should look something like this when you're done. What I didn't show was connecting the ground wire to the pin, and you can see that I was having some issues with clarity on the screen. I had to dig up one of the traces on the Bivert chip and actually solder the wire to the trace since the pad lifted and the chip was all around having to fall apart. Now, I don't know if it was because the chip was bad or my soldering iron was way too hot, but a little flux here and you can see that the screen is back to normal. Speaking of bad parts, the polarizer that came with the backlight was definitely defective. So remember that original piece that we pulled off the back in the beginning? Well, I was able to take the polarizer off, clean it up, and install it in the correct orientation to give us that very crisp backlight biverted look. And here we have a look at just how clear it can be when you set it up correctly. I added some kapton tape over the entire chip since I wasn't sure how long it would last or if it was going to short out on me again, so I did that also with the ground wire as well. Last but not least, I replaced the lens as the lens fell off right when I was putting it all back together. This lens here was not the greatest of quality, but it was plastic and decided to put it on just to protect the screen until we get that back open to finish the fixes on it. Peel off the layer and we get a good look at what the screen should look like when it's finished. Everything seems to be working well, and with that we wrap up this video. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I really do appreciate the comments and suggestions that you guys have to offer. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't, and follow me on Instagram at TheRetroFix. See you next time.